Hi everyone. For the recording, I'm Josh Kinal. I'm Strategy and Content Director at Floate Design Partners. I spend a lot of my time thinking about the way that we actually just do design. So not necessarily how we design things, but how we communicate the way that we're designing with our clients and what user experience or experience as a whole actually means. And recently I realized that I had to learn how to be ignorant. I was originally going to do a talk about how I learned to be ignorant, but I thought it's more important to start with why. And then once we get through that, I've also got some like WordPress examples. So, but they're coming up later, so just, stay just right excited. So, a few years ago, things were really wonderful for a user experience designer like myself, because we would go into a client and we would say, oh, the problem with this site is you need to put the search bar on the right of the screen, and you need to put the rail on the right of the screen as well. That's where they go, that's where people are expecting them, so that's where you should have them. In fact, everything on the website, you should only put it where people are already expecting it to be. That is usability. I went into clients like that with expert knowledge, and I knew it was expert knowledge because Jacob Nielsen had told me so. Not personally. Does everybody know who Jacob Nielsen is? Does anybody know who Jacob Nielsen is? 3 people. Okay. Jacob Nielsen is a usability expert. He kind of coined the phrase with respect to websites and did a whole lot of work with testing usability and setting up proper tests. And then back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, he would publish these reports that told you exactly what to do with your website to maximize usability of the website. That joke really relies on you knowing who Jacob Nielsen is. So that's, well, now it's just, that's kind of, anyway. Years down the track, you'll think that was hilarious. The thing about usability, though, is that it's binary. Things are either usable or they're not, right? It's just black or white like that. Things either meet the expectations of the user or they don't. So it's very easy to say users expect something to be over here, and so you put it over there and it's usable. You don't even have to test it because somebody else has tested it and they already know that 85% of users look for the search bar in the top right. That's on actual statistic, I made that up. But I would go into clients with this expert knowledge that I had learnt from people like, are you telling me that my jacket's not right? Or no, you're just adjusting your own t-shirt. Okay. So I have terrible fear about that. I would go into clients with this expert knowledge that I had derived from reading other people's reports, and this was the general sense of things in web design and UX design at the time, was that we had all of this expert knowledge. We would go into clients with this expert knowledge. We would be experts, expect to be paid like geniuses, everything was successful and everything was happy. So there's not a big path from there to ignorance, right? You know everything, so that's the end goal, rather than ignorance, which is, you would think, a starting point. And then the name of usability changed from usability to user experience. And things went with that from being binary, just being whether it's usable or it's not usable, into being this broad spectrum of what experience actually means. Because if you think about what experience means, it is how somebody is changed after interacting with the thing that you are creating. And we might say, well, it's just after interacting with that thing. So if you're creating a website, think about all the different interactions that somebody might have with that website. An interaction is not just when somebody clicks on something, it's not just when somebody hovers over part of the page. It is also when they look at information, it comes back into their brain and they process it. Everything that you're creating, everything that you're developing, you're expecting somebody to have changed from when they first start to when they finish. That's also why bounce rate is so important in analytics, because you want more people to be changed and you don't want that 63% who have bounced to have bounced. That's just an aside. So you're looking at interaction and effect. You're looking at this idea that we don't necessarily know everything, because when something's black and white, it's really easy to say this is right and this is wrong. When you're talking about experience, there is no right and wrong. There is just how people have changed. I had to take everything I'd learned from Jacob Nielsen and people like Steve Krug and other names other names that are on books whose spines face me on my desk and stare at me every day. I just had to put them at the back of my mind and start thinking about what is the change that I want someone to have after interacting with something that I design. Still not ignorant though, because I have all of this knowledge that I'm bringing to the table. I would go into clients still and say, if we have this kind of animation in response to this kind of interaction, so a click and then something disappears with a pop, that's going to have this neurological response and it's going to have this kind of endocrine response. And I would go in there and say these things with that level of authority because I was an endocrinology major at uni. So I have that authority. I've got a piece of paper that says it. I would walk into clients with that authority, and sometimes all you need to be an expert is to sound like an expert, and I would sound like an expert. So expert I was, thank you very much, pay me the big bucks. Wonderful. Who wants a beer? I'm getting paid big bucks. Eek. And then this happened. We built a site for a client, and we put the menu in the hamburger button. And this was like, I know you all seem shocked, but don't be shocked, because this was 2013 and everyone was putting the menu in the hamburger button. Everything everyone built had a hamburger button. Facebook had a hamburger button and everybody used Facebook, so everybody knew how to use a hamburger button, right? But then the client called up about a month after the site launched and said people didn't know where to find information on the site. And this confused me because we had done a lot of research. I mean, we're UX designers and developers, so we researched the people who were going to be using this site and we designed the... Do I have a time limit on this, by the way, or can I just go on until tomorrow?
Tomorrow, not so much.
Okay. That's all right.
You're
yeah,
okay.
all right. Because I'm extending, is all I'm saying. So we'd done a lot of user experience research on this. We'd spoken to people who would be using this site. And we used that experience to guide our information architecture. So when we designed the information architecture, we knew that things were under the headings and in the order and in the hierarchy that people would expect to find them. We had also spent a lot of time designing the homepage so that people didn't have to use the menu. It was really there as a fallback mechanism if they wanted to find the most useful information that was based on our research. Unfortunately, we did not have analytics to go on from a previous website, so we only had the collected data from our pre-research, but still, the client was very happy with the design of the homepage. The client was very happy with the design of the menu. We'd test the menu for accessibility. We'd test the menu for responsiveness. We'd tested the menu out the wazoo. There was no reason people should not be able to find any information on this website, except they had to click on the hamburger button. And the people who were using this website were not familiar with the hamburger button. They may have seen them, but it did not represent for them anything that they had experienced in the real world. It didn't look, for example, like an envelope, which is what an email icon looks like. It looks like 3 lines in a box, and that could mean anything. The other thing that we didn't understand is that the people who are using this site, if they didn't understand something on a computer, they didn't click on it, because their experience with computers up until that point was if they clicked on something that they didn't understand and they didn't remember what they clicked on, and they couldn't find their way back to what it was that they had started with, they had broken the computer and they've got to call up their son. That's me and my dad in that scenario. That's it. So they're not going to click on something that they don't understand because they don't want to break it. And for them, like for us, it's ridiculous, this idea that you could even break a website by clicking on something. But for them, their experience with the web is not their experience with the web. Their experience with the web is their experience with computers as a whole. And it doesn't matter that their experience with computers as a whole in the last 5 years is completely different to the experience they had in the first 20 years. That first 20 years has terrified them. So they're not going to click on that, which means they're not going to find the information that they need, which means they're not going to know where to go in the site. Oh, the other thing is, did I mention? I think I forgot, we put the search bar in the hamburger button as well, because those things are ugly. And ugly things go in the hamburger menu. We know that. So here's one thing that I learned about experience. Everyone's is different, and nobody's is wrong. That might be 2 things, that might be 1 thing with a conjunction, you make the choice. When we did the research for this website, we researched a whole lot of things, but we did not include users' understanding of the semiotics of modern web design. That just wasn't a part of our research. We had made that assumption. We had made that assumption that users had moved with the web to be familiar with the way things looked now. We had made that assumption because that was the experience that we had, that was the web that we understood, and we're designers. We really just want to impress people and have lots of bells and whistles to make people excited about stuff. I mean, we talk about wanting things just to work. We talk about documentaries like Helvetica that talk about the font as being this perfect, simple font. But what we really want is impact. We don't really, it's horrible. But the thing is, what we want is something that is exciting as well as useful. If something can bring delight, we think we've designed it well. We're always going to go for too much before we pull ourselves back and go for something that is simple. But what the people who used this website needed was just something that is simple. Our research started with assumptions, and our mistake was not writing down what those assumptions were and not testing that those assumptions were correct. We made a huge mistake at the start of the project by not researching what we already knew and then working out what our starting position was, and then working out what the client's starting position was, and also what the user's starting position was, and what the differences were between those, so that we could actually bring everything closer together through the actual web design. I developed some new skills, which was balancing knowledge of the goal with this role play of not understanding anything about the web when I started. And I would have to balance these two when doing research with potential users. They would tell me their experience thus far, and I would then take on their experience as my own and role play that so that I understood what they were going through when they were going to use the site. This is a really difficult skill, which is why I'm not going to talk about how I did that. That's kind of magic. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of designers and developers being very angry at someone saying, oh, but they're not going to understand that. Because that's the other thing. It's not in our nature to just go, they're not going to understand that. We want to assume the best of everybody, or at least assume that everybody is at our level, or at the very least assume that everybody should be at our level, and if they're not at our level, what are they even doing working on computers? Why don't they just go and fly kites and leave the computers to us? So I had to admit that I did not have this knowledge about our users. I had to admit ignorance about that, and that was my starting point. And you're all thinking, well, what does this have to do with WordPress? Nothing. The whole thing was a lie. That's not true. I want you to imagine a scenario where they change everything in WP Includes. No, that was a joke just for them. Imagine a scenario where you're building a site that is just a news site for a client. I say just a news site. News sites are incredibly complex. One of the most complicated things about news sites are the taxonomy, because everyone wants everything categorized inside a news site. I know Dee and I have both worked on the same news site, and their taxonomy is not 100% as sharp as it should be for the information that they're putting out. Taxonomy is a tough one. But when we're designing a WordPress site, we think of the taxonomy that we're going to use. We think of the way that we're going to use taxonomy. We think of the way that we're going to have categories for articles, and then we're going to think of the way that tags are used for articles, and that's going to help the search, it's going to help people find things, it's going to make more sense in our index pages. We're going to have all these categories and tags that are going to help people, because that's what we think about as well. We're going to help people when it comes to building a WordPress site. So we build this WordPress site with careful concentration on taxonomy, and we build some custom content types. Maybe they want to put podcasts on their new site in years to come, so we want to set up that functionality for them now. And we do all of these things that we think we're thinking of for them. We think we're doing a great job by giving them all of this functionality. We hand over the website at the end of the build and give them, if they're lucky, a 2-hour tutorial on how to use the CMS. This is how you add an article. This is how you put an article in a category. This is how you add the tags. Yes, you can put an article in multiple categories. I wouldn't. I can't explain why now. Then this is where you add the featured image. You can also add more images inline if you want. This is where you put your excerpt. And then you publish it, and you can see the article appears on this part of the website, and a little tile with the image and the excerpt and the headline appear on the homepage. That's how you add things to your CMS. Thank you very much for your check for thousands of dollars. I'll be on the phone if you need me. But don't call, because I'm going to be really impatient when you call. Because I just don't have time to deal with you now. You're a former client. I've done your website. I'm doing someone else's website now. If you're actually freelancing or running your own business as a WordPress developer, don't use that last bit. It's terrible for ongoing sales. Absolutely terrible. Here's something that, hands up who is a developer who is actually doing things for clients as ongoing projects or just freelancing. Great. How many of you have had a phone call from a client saying, I've just published a change to this page and I can't see it on the site? How many of you then have told that client to refresh their browser and then tell them how to do a hard refresh on their browser if that's the kind of browser that they have? Some of them don't have hard refreshes these days, or they only have hard refreshes by default. No one knows. It's all a new landscape. And then it still doesn't appear, so then you tell them, oh, you actually have to flush the cache on the CMS. And you say, I'll do this for you, but in future, if you ever need to flush the cache, there's the cache menu on the left-hand side, right near the bottom. It says WP Super Cache. I think is that right? Yeah. Click on that. There'll be a flush the cache button. That's all you need to know. And then you go on your merry way. You've helped them. Great. Except your client doesn't know what cache is. Your client doesn't know what taxonomy means. Most people don't use that word in everyday interactions. They don't use the word taxonomy. They don't use the word cache, unless they're pirates and there's a whole bunch of treasure somewhere. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't make any sense to them. They don't know what cache means. But you haven't thought of that, because you know what cache means. You live in the web. And I mean, you live in the web. So these people live in houses and streets and open up fridges and get food and do all of these other things. They still think that a website is as easy as making a Word document. And when they make a Word document, any change that they make happens automatically on screen. They don't understand how processors work, they don't understand how servers work, they don't understand how phone lines work, or how ISDN lines work, or how fiber optics work. They don't need to know any of that until they become the owner of a CMS. And then it's our responsibility to know what they don't know. Cache is an example of one of those things they don't know. Taxonomy is another example of one of those things they don't know. These are all new concepts to them, and these are really strange and non-tangible concepts that they don't understand. Our role as developers and designers is to understand what our starting position is, and what our client's starting position is, and what our users' starting position is. And then identifying all the differences between those starting positions. Once we have identified the differences, we can then start to deal with our clients and our users with a little bit more compassion, understanding that they don't understand things, pretending to be as ignorant as they are, and asking questions about, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? I didn't see this on Sesame Street. I didn't learn this between prep and year 9. Year 9 is when I stopped listening to older people, and then I went to uni and there were drugs and drink, and then I got a job. And now I'm an adult and I don't want to do my taxes, I don't want to fill in any forms, and what you've given me is something that is full of a bunch of forms, and then said some words that I don't understand and said, here you go. And that's why 1 year down the track, clients' websites aren't humming along as smoothly as you had intended when you designed them, because we didn't take that time to be ignorant at the start and understand from their position everything that they were going to need to do. So that's why I learnt to be ignorant. The how is really introspective, and I invite you all to a meditation circle later to understand a little bit more about that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I've just yelled at you for 25 minutes. Yes?
So I have a question.
Yes.
So, which is actually kind of going to get to the how, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's...
My question is, so in the intervening period, since that revelation about actually trying to put yourself in the client's and the user's shoes as well, what's changed? Is it how you actually design, or is it the interface for users, or is it the how you put together the CMS stuff for the clients, or is it both? Or so because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I've done all of those things. I've built this website that does all these amazing things that I know how to use that the client doesn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, I've spent a lot of time training clients, but there's still sometimes that breakdown where I go, I've got this great advanced custom fields, there's all this beautiful stuff that they can put in, but they're sitting there looking at this big lot of empty boxes going, shit. So, yeah, how did that, my question really is, what changed? So what ended up changing in your processes in the agency or your processes personally to actually...
So there's a lot that has changed. Some of it has changed in the way we set up the CMS for the client. Some of it has changed in the way that we actually deliver the website. So now I will ask a question at the start of the project, or I'll speak to the tech team, or I'll speak to the people who will be the owners of the website and say, how likely is it that you are actually going to update information on this website? Is it better for you to just have a static website that exists and you never have to touch it, never has to be updated, never has to be taken care of, and in 12 months' time you can hire us for a day and we'll do all the updates and everything you need and export another flat version for you? So that's kind of the really simplest, is asking that question, how much time do you have to take care of this thing that we're going to spend a lot of really emotional hours building for you? That's the first step. And then having them understand that having a website is like having a pet or a child or a Tamagotchi. It needs attention, it needs to be fed, and if you ignore it, it is going to die. More like a Tamagotchi, it's not going to smell as much, but it'll stink up your life a little bit. So letting them understand how much responsibility having a website with a content management system is. That's part of that process. There's a lot more to the client explanation and the are you really sure? Are you really sure? Do you want to try to look after this watermelon for 3 days and see if you're ready for parenthood concept? On the other end of the scale, when we come to, when we're starting with the design and and creating the interface, it's a lot more minuscule, or it's more in the minutiae. So looking at every single bit of a screen and saying, how does that work? How do I know that that works? What is there on the page to give me a hint as to how that works or what that does? One of the big changes we did is we just replaced the hamburger button with the word menu. That was easy. Where's the menu? Oh, it's in the menu button. Make it look like a button as well. Flat design doesn't make things look like buttons. Give that some kind of drop shadow or something. So yes, that's one of them. Yeah?
I just believe a website should be as simple to use like a car. You go to the airport with a rental car, model you never driven, you expect to drive away to the hotel without running into something, without reading instructions.
Uh-huh.
You probably can use 80% is standard, you know, the pedals are, the gear shift, the indicator kind of stuff. Maybe the little things you will know how to change, probably tune the radio stuff, but I mean, you should be able to drive the thing without reading instructions. That's how you should regularly should use website. You should be expected certain thing at a certain place. You should have to think. I want to find something. The menu's there, the search button is there, the footer is at the bottom. You look at the About Us page, probably find at the bottom.
And what if you get a flat tire and you're out of cell coverage?
Well, yeah.
That's because that's the reality of it. Things go wrong.
Yeah.
But yes, a website should be as easy to use as that.
Yeah.
But I don't know what a Driveshaft is, but I had to spend $800 on one today.
How do you balance that? Because I hear all of those things, and because that's where people expect it.
Yep.
How do you balance that with, I want to build something that impacts people and is really fun and nice and pretty and different, because you can look at a million websites that have a footer and a right rail and a header, and you go, yeah, it's a website, yeah, it's giving me the information I need, but there's no oomph, you know. And as painful as those flash years were, at least you would get some moments where it's like, oh my god, check this out, this is really, really cool, and I see less of those happening.
But you thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's true.
How many of those websites were getting used? How many, but then also, how many like cool interactions did you have with Flash websites for restaurants where you still couldn't find the bloody menu?
Yeah, that's a classic. That's a classic.
These things happen. We think we're being really exciting.
Sometimes the developers, they sort of put like a showcase what they can do, not actually what the user's going to use. There's a big difference. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not like I can build this, it's the most fancy things, that's great, but me as a user, I don't care what you can do. I want the information, I want the menu, not a flashy animation of the restaurant. I know what to eat, how much the menu costs. I want to have one click. I haven't got time to look for the menu.
We do a lot of annual reports and shareholder reviews for clients. We built a website that had some just shit hot design in it last year for one of our clients. And then I was pitching to another client and said, well, did you see the shareholder review that we did for these guys? It's amazing, and it's fully responsive, and it's got parallax scrolling, and it's got like huge backgrounds, and everything's beautiful, and it doesn't look like any other website, and it's just really amazing. And she said, yeah, I tried to have a look at that, and I couldn't get past the first page. Because her screen was set up to be magnified on a laptop, which meant that it went down a width in our breakpoints, and that started bringing in some of the iPad interaction devices, which meant it had the iPad style cover, which meant that she was supposed to tap and drag the cover away. And we had put a click in as a fallback so that someone could just click on that and get rid of it, but because the company that she was working for still had all of their laptops on IE9, that JavaScript didn't work for some reason or another, and we didn't test it on that. And we thought we were being really clever. And we were, until we didn't get that job. And we were being really, really clever, so clever that we smarted ourselves out of work and money. So this year when I'm designing that same site, I've used, and this is another way, sorry Peter, this is another way that our processes have changed. So we're building things in Patent Lab, which is a patent library that you can get at patentlab.io that is really impressively put together. And we're building everything with CSS and HTML before we put any JavaScript on the page, and we make sure that everything can be viewed at all breakpoints before we put any whiz-bang stuff on the site. And then if we have time, we put the whiz-bang stuff on. And we build things in increments as well. Pete?
How's your terminology changed in reviews? You were talking a lot about taxonomy. No one else uses it.
Yeah.
How much, or maybe how, I'm asking for a dictionary of what's changed with that, but how much has your language changed?
I've changed, not what I say, because I still use the words that other designers and developers will use with them, but I will stop and explain them a lot more. So I will say taxonomy, and then I'll explain what the taxonomy is, like what taxonomy actually means, And I might say something simple like taxonomy is a fancy word that people use for how information on your website is categorized. So if you're familiar with hashtags on Twitter, that's a form of taxonomy. It means that people can search for other elements that relate to that element. You're going to hear that word a lot. You're going to learn a lot more about it. Let's move on. So I might do something like that, where I just explain it, trying to not be too condescending. I think my voice is just condescending generally. So I just assume that people are going to think I'm an asshole when I leave. That's fine. If I can be an asshole who helped them, that's perfect. Well, not perfect. I'd rather they think I was a nice guy. That's just not going to happen, though. It's just not. But yeah, so I'll do that. And then when it comes up again, I might ask them if they remember what it is. Here's another thing that I learned about people is that they'll say they understand something when they absolutely don't. I do that all the time. I do that because I can't be bothered having someone explain it to me just because I'm lazy. I'd rather watch a TV show or do anything other than have something explained to me right now. But then it's brought up again 2 minutes later, 2 days later, 2 years later, and I never learnt what it was. So I think my language has changed in helping people understand that it's okay to be ignorant. It's okay to not know what I'm talking about. And it's okay to stop me and ask. A lot of clients and colleagues will say, oh, stupid question, and then blah, 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 blah. Right? And then they'll have some question that is not stupid, but pertinent to what they were needing to do with their job at that moment. But we've been conditioned to think that any question that we have is a stupid question. That's happened probably because primary school teachers got together one year and decided that they were just going to create a whole lot of people who were not confident. It made us feel bad about asking questions, and then that happened. Or maybe peers decided without us. Anyone realise that? That while we're having a meeting here, everybody else is having a meeting about us? And decided just to make us feel like we didn't know what was going on. But we had to pretend like we knew what was going on so that we could fit in. So that's bullshit. Ask questions, expect people to ask questions of you. Don't make people feel stupid for asking you a question. But if there is a process that you want someone to go through to learn to help themselves, it's fine to say, have you looked it up on this thing, or this thing, before I explain it to you? Have you Googled it? Have you looked it up on the wiki or on Jira or Confluence, or have you searched through the Slack channel? You can say all of those things. And if they say yes, then you can say, okay, well, here is it, and I'll explain to you. Yes?
Just picking up on that theme of the car, the problem is when you're searching for something on the net, you have such a mass of information you have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it make sense instead that you would treat the client much the way you would if you bought a car, which is that you get a basic manual and it basically describes, like an actual hard copy. I think you make a file where you actually define the terms to help them out.
I've done that for clients. I've created manuals. And people learn in different ways. So I've had clients say, thank you for this, I'm never going to use it. And I say, well, thank you very much for your honesty. I'm still charging you for the time it took me to write it.
And I'm not going to answer the phone.
That was in our contract. No, but then I will answer the phone because people learn in different ways, and a lot of people can't learn by reading. A lot of people don't know how to read a set of instructions and then translate that set of instructions from the page to the screen. Right? A lot of people just don't have that skill. You're talking about taking information from one medium and putting it in a different medium, or
You ever thought about doing like an IKEA type manual, which is just, here's this figure and it's doing this and picking up this.
well, my instruction manuals have screenshots in them with big arrows and things that are circled. It's just that they don't even think to look at printed reference material. It's not in their nature. Yeah.
The other thing that you also not take into account is WordPress changes 4 times a year. So you can create a manual and it will work for somebody for a while. And even if they've printed it out and it's looking at it, the WordPress updates to 4.3 or 4.4, and then it's like, it doesn't look the same anymore. So,
I've just assumed that water
yeah,
is
that's
for.
quite alright.
Okay. I don't know if
yeah,
it's.
there's
But yeah, so it changes from time to time. And Sarah, I don't mean to point you out, but your sarcasm or your disbelief is the problem that we all have, right? How can someone run a business and not know how to read a bunch of instructions? Well, hands up who's ever worked for somebody who's run a business who didn't know how to pay the super on time. People are not very good at the things that they do, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they stopped listening at year 9, started drinking at year 10, went to uni, started taking drugs at uni, graduated from uni, got a job, still kept taking drugs until they had kids, and then they couldn't have fun anymore. Right? And now, I don't have kids. And now, no, I signed a thing. And now they have to work, or a third party dies.
Or people started their business doing their thing because they were a technician doing their thing as a business, but didn't start their business because they wanted to start a business.
Yep.
So then there's the business side of things that is more challenging for some than others.
Yeah, that is a great point. There's
No, well, no, but there's people that do.
there are people that do, but Pete and I ran a business for some years, and we were both. Yeah, it's dead now, Pete. The domain expired yesterday. Like literally, it expired yesterday. Pete and I poured one out over Instant Messenger, and it was done. I'm really good at my stuff. Pete's really good at his stuff. We had to run a business together, and neither of us wanted to run a business. We wanted to do the work, and we wanted to have the work, but we didn't want to run a business. And in that, Pete had to deal with MYOB. And what was the learning curve that you had with MYOB, Pete?
Steep.
It's steep. And people have to deal with that. If they're running their own business, if you're talking about a sole trader or a small business owner, they have to deal with learning that craziness that is MYOB, or how to integrate I just forgot but this thing with Xero, and everything's supposed to work together, except it doesn't. You need to go over here to get an API key, or it says in the instructions that you need an API key, but then when you go to the actual place, it says this is your user key and your user pass, and it's a long string of seemingly random characters, and is that my API key? How do I know? If I put it in this thing, is it going to work? How am I going to know if it works straight away? I don't. And then you're giving me your website to keep updated? This is a lot to take on, and at the same time, at some point, I have to do the work. If I'm a sole trader, I have to actually do the work that I need to do for all my clients. So, no, sometimes they don't want to, sometimes they just don't have the time.
I think that's just a really good advertisement for asking that question. How much time are you going to have to look after this? And then actually having that conversation before you're even building the website, in terms of this is how, and once it's built, then we'll transition you onto here's your monthly update plan or whatever it is, and take it from there, because so many of us have got clients who's like, yeah, we're going to look after it, bollocks, and then end up calling me 6 months later, hey Dee, have you got a backup on my website because this happened and I'm screwed, and I'm like, so anyway, there's a whole other world of pain that I'm not dealing with right now, but
anybody else have
we need to
any
wrap
questions?
up there.
That lady's taking a photo now. She's had like 50 minutes to take a photo. She's taking a photo now. Anyone else? Anything else? No? Thanks.
Thanks, Josh.